And so I'd like to welcome you today. I can see we have quite a few people who've joined us already. And we can see actually that people are joining at a fast rate, which is great. We'll just take our time starting to allow people to join us. And while we're waiting, I am going to post our accommodations notice. We have accommodations for people who are hard of hearing and who would welcome a captioning service. And the instructions are on this slide as to what's available and how to access it. The link to the service is actually posted in our Q&A feed. You can see in your upper right hand corner of your screen a double speech bubble with a question mark. If you click that, you'll see in the featured feed the link to the captioning service is there. You can cut and paste that into your browser and access the service that way. But I'll leave the slide up for a moment for those who are interested to read those instructions. And also a transcript of this event is available from our website within 48 hours. Anybody who registered will receive an email with a link to that after the event. And once again, I'll just mention that the link to the captioning service is in the Q&A feed, in the featured feed. You can access that by clicking on the speech bubble in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, the one with the question mark on it, and you can cut and paste that link into your browser. And so, respecting everybody's time, we're going to move along, and I'm going to hand over to Adriana Cruz, the Executive Director of Economic Development and Tourism, which is an important part of the Office of the Governor. Over to you, Adriana.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Adriana Cruz. I'm the Executive Director of the Economic Development and Tourism Office in the Office of Governor Greg Abbott. And on behalf of Governor Abbott and the entire team at the Economic Development and Tourism Office, I want to thank you and welcome you for joining us for the second Governor Small Business Webinar of 2021. Through these webinars, our goal is to provide you information and to connect you with local resources to help you find success on your entrepreneurial journey. Last year, we held 15 small business webinars throughout the year with more than 22,000 small businesses registered. We wanted to start off 2021 right away, given the passage of the Consolidated Appropriations Act on December 27th. And today we'll be hearing from experts from the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Development Center, to give us the latest information on the new round of PPP funding. Under Governor Abbott's leadership, our office is committed to work with you to make sure that Texas continues to be ranked as the top state in the country to start a business and to be an entrepreneur. Texas's small business owners and the entrepreneurs are the backbone of our economy, and we want to thank you for everything that you do to keep our economy going. Working together, we'll continue to keep the strong trajectory of economic growth for Texas. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our small business office, Kelly Spillane, Jarvis Brewer, and Sam Shornack, and our business permit office, Sonia Galliard, if we can do anything to provide assistance to you as you continue to do business in the Lone Star State. And now I'll turn it over to our small business advocate, Kelly Spillane. Kelly.
Great. Thank you, Adriana. So we're going to move along and start our event today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for making time. I'm going to introduce our panelists now. These are the people who will be sharing expert information. These are the people who are at the coalface at the moment, serving small businesses with the new resources and new information from the Small Business Administration. And so today we have Tim Jeffcoat. He's the director of the Small Business Administration in Houston. He's the district director. We have Rodney Johnson. He is the director of the Small Business Center in Tarrant County. And we also have Nestor Astorga. He's a senior business advisor at the COBRA, which is the COVID Business Recovery Accelerator in San Antonio. This unit actually serves the state of Texas, not just San Antonio. And so we are honored and delighted to have these three experts join us today to answer your questions and share information that's on the top of everybody's mind right now. And so before we move along to talk to them, I just want to mention that our live question and answer feed is now open. You can write your own questions in there, but before you do, look at the featured feed in front of you. My colleagues will be publishing questions that have been asked. I would urge you to like the questions that you want to see answered. We're going to prioritize the questions that have the most likes. And so just make sure before you ask your question that somebody hasn't already asked it. All right. So thank you very much. We unfortunately will not get to all the questions, but we have two of our colleagues back of house. We have Sam Shornack and Michael Traeger who are answering questions directly. So if you do ask a question, you may get a direct answer. So make sure to double check for that. So thank you very much in advance for asking those questions, and we will move along. And we're going to start with some frequently asked questions. And I'm going to start by talking to Tim Jeffcoat, the District Director of the SBA in East Texas. Thank you for joining us, Tim. Thank you for making time.
It is my pleasure.
Excellent. Great. So I'm going to go straight into the questions that I have here on the slide. The first question is, how is the Small Business Administration ensuring smaller companies will have a better chance at securing a PPP loan in this new round?
You know what? And I have recent data on that. There have been a number of provisions that we've undertaken. So first, let's give Congress some attribute, because Congress specifically set aside pieces of the funding for small business support in this act to go to small depository institutions, often minority deposit institutions, to make sure that the money gets to the smaller borrowers. And then amounts of the funding, which by the way is $284.45 billion. Some of that was set aside just for the very smallest first-time borrowers, as well as for the smallest second-time PPP borrowers. And as of yesterday, late yesterday, it looks like 65% of all of the loans that are currently being done are going to folks for about $50,000 or $60,000 or less. So the very smallest one. So we can also tell you with real up-to-date data that it is working.
Okay. Great. Well, it's fantastic to hear about these provisions to just make sure that the smaller businesses have a good chance. And with that in mind, you and I were talking recently and you were pointing out some interesting things, and I'd like you to share with the audience, what are the key things that sole proprietors and independent contractors should consider before applying for a PPP?
Sure, that's great. In fact, I was just talking to an Uber driver earlier. As an independent contractor, is PPP the right thing for me? Well, Paycheck Protection Program is what PPP stands for. So it's really intended to go to businesses that have a staff and need to pay paychecks. But if you're an independent contractor or you're a sole proprietor with no employees, then it's your paycheck we're talking about. And in that case, the IRS defines your paycheck as your net profit. So in your case, if you look at line 31 on your Form 1040 tax return, that's the amount that constitutes your paycheck to the Internal Revenue Service. So the way that works is you're going to take that amount, divide it by 12 to get it on a monthly basis, multiply by 2.5, that's your loan. In some cases, if you don't earn much profit, then it won't be very much money. The specific example today, the individual says, I only have about 20,000 in profits. Should I bother applying? Well, 20,000 divided by 12 times 2.5 is about $4,200. It's not a huge amount of money, but it might make a difference, and it's 100% forgivable. So in that case, if it were me, I think I would be very interested in it.
Okay, look, that's great to know. And thank you, Tim. We're going to come back to Tim during the live Q&A. And I'm going to move along now to Rodney Johnson. Thank you for joining us today, Rodney. It's great to have you back. And you're mute there, Rodney. Okay, Rodney's just going to unmute.
There you go. I'm sorry. It's very nice to be here, Kelly.
Super to have you. Thank you for that. So look, I'm going to go straight into the questions you and I discussed. The first question for you, Rodney, is can you explain the difference between a first and second draw PPP loan?
Yes, there are provisions that are being made that if you, during the course of 2020, during the season, from the time that the loans PPP opened until the time that it closed, if you were not able to, if you qualified but was not able to procure or to submit an application for the PPP loan, then you would be considered a first-time applicant. There are other provisions in there that consider you a first-time applicant. Things such as if you had applied and you were approved, but yet you did not secure the funds, you did not use the funds, then you would be reconsidered as a first-time applicant. If you had applied and you were refused or you were denied, and now your circumstances have changed, you again are considered a first-time applicant. So the difference between a first-time applicant and a second-time applicant is that the first-time applicant, the second-time applicant must have secured a PPP loan, and it should have been either forgiven or rolled into an additional loan. So the second-time applicant certainly would have already successfully have been awarded a PPP loan. First-time applicants have not received PPP funding before when the process was open.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. And the second question really is, how would you advise a first-time PPP applicant to get ready to prepare to apply for that loan?
Well, I think that I've always coached and counseled and advised my clients to have 4 people on their speed dial on their phone. I think they should have a mentor. They should have somebody who is business savvy, preferably in their industry. I think they should have a confidant who is able to speak confidently to them, to tell them the truth and the hard news. I think they should have a lawyer on their speed dial because of the legalities that small businesses express. And a fourth one is that they should have a CPA or somebody who is financially savvy, working directly with their business. And so in order to prepare, it is best that you bring all parties to the table, you bring all information to the table so that your package can be best prepared before being presented to one of the lenders. The better you prepare your package, your application, the higher your likelihood that your application is going to go through without delays or denial. So how would I advise you to prepare? Pull your team together, pull your data together, pull your facts together, have your data already organized, sequenced, and ready to be interpreted. That's the best way to prepare for a PPP application.
Okay, great advice. And the numbers, of course, are the most important. Have those numbers
Absolutely.
ready and organized.
Understand your numbers. Absolutely.
Sure. So great. And thank you, Rodney. Now I'm going to move along, and the last couple of questions we're going to ask of Nestor. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us, Nestor.
Thank you.
Okay. For you, Nestor, can you tell us what makes a business eligible to apply versus ineligible?
Yes, well, first I have to say why it is important to be eligible. You have to be eligible so you can apply for a first or a second draw of PPP. Being ineligible will be regarded as a use of PPP funds for unauthorized purposes, which the misuse of the PPP funds for unauthorized purposes will direct the SBA to you to repay those amounts, and worse, if you knowingly use the funds for unauthorized purposes, you will be subject to additional liability such as charges for fraud. So according to the guidance for the first draw, and some of these might apply to the second draw for PPP, you are eligible for a PPP loan if you, together with any affiliates, are a small business concern under the applicable revenue-based size standard established by the SBA or under the SBA alternative size standards, or you are an independent contractor, eligible self-employed individual, or sole proprietor, or you are a business concern and you were in operation on February the 15th, 2020, and either had employees for whom you paid salaries and payroll taxes or paid independent contractors as reported on Form 1099, or you were an eligible self-employed individual, independent contractor, or sole proprietorship with no employees. There are also industry-specific eligibility issues to be considered. Now, in regards to ineligible causes for the first draw, these are some. If you are doing illegal activities, if you, number one. Number two, if you are a household employer. Number three, if you have been incarcerated or in any felony. Number four, for those who have a SBA loan or any other federal loan currently delinquent or has defaulted in the last 7 years. Number five, business or organizations not in operation on February the 15th of 2020. Number six, those who received or will receive a chartered venue operator grant. Number seven, if you are the president, vice president, or an executive department members of Congress or spouse who have an involvement in a business. Number eight, the business is an issuer of securities. Number nine, the business has permanently closed and has no intention to reopening. Number 10, an entity that together with its domestic and foreign affiliates does not meet the 500 employee, 300 employee, or other applicable PPP size standard. Number 11, next, entities that use PPP funds to support non-US workers or operations. Number 12, the business is in bankruptcy. Number 13, the applicant or the owner of the applicant becomes the debtor in a bankruptcy proceedings after submitting a PPP application, but before the loan is disbursed. Number 14, it's a hedge fund or a private equity firm. Number 15, business are debarred or suspended to sell to the government. Number 16, you applied and got more than one PPP. So that's for the first draw. Now for the second draw, some of the previous apply and you will be eligible if you have received previously a PPP first draw and have used or will use all the funds on the initial PPP loan for authorized purposes on or before the expected date of disbursement of the second draw PPP. You have 300 or fewer employees and you experience a revenue reduction in 2020 relative to 2019 of at least 25%. A borrower temporarily closed or temporarily suspended remains eligible for a second draw of PPP. Now, you can be ineligible if you applied and got more than one PPP second draw. Number one, an entity that it is ineligible to receive a first draw PPP loan under the CARES Act, it's also ineligible for a second PPP draw. Number two, a borrower that received a first draw loan despite being ineligible to receive the loan is not eligible to receive a second draw PPP. Number three, a business concern or entity primarily engaged in political activities or lobbying. Number four, certain entities organized under the laws of people of the Republic of China or Hong Kong. Number five, a person required to submit a registration statement under Section 2 of Foreign Agents Registration Act. Number six, very important, a person or entity that receives a grant for chartered venue operations. Number seven, if you are related politically and have a company. Number eight, if you're a public traded company and are a issuer of securities. Number nine, an entity has previously received a second draw of PPP. Number 10, an entity that has permanently closed. And this answers this question.
Wow, Rodney, that's amazing. That's so complex. That's a lot of information.
I'm sorry.
I know. No. On our second last slide, we have links to information from the SBA. So if people didn't quite get all of that, there are links for you to go check that out if that's a concern. So thank you for that, Rodney. I have a quick last question for you. For those who already have a PPP loan, how can they make the most of this second draw opportunity?
Well, mostly I would say that by abiding to the SBA guidance for forgiveness published, especially the one published on the 19th of this month. So it can be fully forgiven, hopefully 100%. But to accomplish this, you need to use it at least in the following proportions. So 60% or more should be used for payroll costs and 40% or less for eligible non-payroll costs, which include rent, mortgage, utilities that were in the previous guidance for 2020. And now for 2021, we have in those non-payroll cost categories, we have covered operation expenditures, covered property damage, covered supplier costs, and covered worker protection expenditures. That's it.
Okay, super. Well, thank you, Nestor. That was loads of information. And so we're going to move along now to the live question and answer section, which is our most popular section. I can see that we have plenty of questions asked. Do look at the featured feed and like the questions you want to hear so that we can prioritize those. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Jarvis Brewer. Over to you, sir. Yeah, you're muted, sir.
Fell victim to my own statement. So thank you so much, Kelly. And before we begin, I want to say continue to submit your questions. I see a ton of questions already have been submitted. Continue to also like the questions. And from these questions, I can see how varied our audience is. There's a lot of questions regarding first round or first draw, as well as second round, second draw. So with that, I know our panelists, we have a great lineup of panelists here. I will be assigning these questions to specific panelists, but I know that all three of you are equally able to answer any of these questions. So if there's anything you want to add on to another panelist's statements, definitely feel free to do so. I'll just go in the straight order of Tim, Rodney, and Nestor, but again, if you have anything else to add, please do so. So I'll start with you, Tim. This first question, I'm going to go slightly out of order because I've seen a lot of interest in first round PPP. This question is from Chandler, and the question is, what is the process for round one PPP loan forgiveness? So I know that's a lot that goes with simply the forgiveness, but effectively, I'm assuming that they're saying, okay, I am done with my expenditures. How do I begin to ask for forgiveness?
Very good. I owe Jarvis 20 bucks. I told him to give me the easy ones. So the answer there is, if you have finished spending your first round PPP, from the end of your covered period, you would have been either 8 or 24 weeks, you get 10 months, 1-0. And in that time frame, that's the time you get to finish your PPP forgiveness application. There are 4 applications. I guess there might technically be 5 now. I think they combined the 50,000 on the 150. But now you're going to be a matter of choosing what's the right path forward regarding forgiveness. But you have 10 months to finish that process. Now, there are some lenders that right now will tell you, don't send us your application. We don't want to work with it right now. And, you know, if you're like me, you want to get it over with. You'd like to get the forgiveness behind you, but it's okay. You got 10 months. No need to rush. In fact, a month ago, I would have told you just hang on because there's a new forgiveness application coming out, which already has, which makes it simpler for folks with loans of $150,000 or less to get forgiveness. So generally speaking, and I'll just go one step farther, if you have lots of employees, you have had a very large PPP loan, then probably what some would call the long form, the 3508, is the one you probably want to work with because it gives you lots of flexibility in how you approach forgiveness. If it's just a couple others and you got a relatively small loan under 150, use that form. Really easy. It's only 1 page long. And you just got to make sure you keep your records for, I think it's 4 years.
That is perfect. Thank you so much for that detailed explanation. And I kind of went out of order simply because there's some follow-up questions to that, which I think first we have to go through this forgiveness process for the first draw before I ask this one. So this next question comes from Jack. In the second round of PPP, are the rules for forgiveness the same as in the first round? And I'll ask this question to Rodney.
Okay, so in the second round, the rules for forgiveness, for the most part, are the same. With one of the exceptions being, you have an option of selecting any time period between 8 and 24. 8 and 24 weeks, right? I mean, so you get to determine what that time frame is that you want as your review period, if you will. So that's critical. Before it was either, you know, if you had gotten a loan before June the 5th, I think it was a definite 8 weeks, and then after June 5th, it was a definite 24. Well, those rules have been modified to say, okay, somewhere between 8 and 24, based off of the context of your business. What you tell us what makes sense for you as far as a cover period. So that's one of the major changes that I know that has taken place as far as the difference in round number 2.
Thank you for that, Rodney. And again, another follow-up from the first round PPP forgiveness and second draw PPP forgiveness. So Nestor, I have another follow-up regarding these two programs, even though it's the same. So can I apply for the second round of PPP forgiveness before the first round of forgiveness is processed?
My understanding is that you need to finish the use of and I'm gonna reply with if you have received the previous PPP first draw and you have used or will use the full amount of the initial PPP for authorized uses on or before the expected date of disbursement of the second draw of PPP, and and you have experienced a 25% decrease in revenue comparing the years 2019 and 2020.
Okay. So Kathy has a question about the time. How long do you have to spend the money in order for it to qualify for forgiveness? And I believe Rodney just touched on this, but I'm going to relay this to Tim.
Yeah, Rodney nailed it. If you go now and get a PPP loan, you're going to choose 8 to 24 weeks. So it could be 8, 9, 10, anything up to 24 weeks, whatever makes sense for you. And there's no way to tell without knowing your business which date makes more sense or which duration.
Thank you, sir. So Rodney, this question was also submitted. How will the forgiveness loan be treated? Is it treated as income? Mm-hmm. So once you receive your forgiveness amount, is that treated as income?
That's a great question. Tim, I'm going to throw that one over to you.
Okay. The IRS has been instructed by the Economic Relief Act to make sure that it is not considered as income for taxable purposes. That also includes if you got the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant, it also will not be viewed. Now, this is an IRS thing, not SBA, but it also will not be viewed as income for purposes of taxation.
Thank you. So it does not count as income. Keep that in mind. So another question, all right, moving right along. What are the specifics for allowed expenses for the second PPP? So what can I use my PPP loan for that will be allowable for forgiveness? And I'm going to begin with Nestor with this question.
Yes, there are, I would say, 2 buckets. One of them, it's payroll costs, which payroll costs include salary, wages, commissions, or similar compensation. On the other hand, cash tips or the equivalent, payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowance for separation or dismissal, payment for the provision of employee benefits consisting of group health care or group life, disability, vision, or dental insurance, including insurance premiums and retirement, payment of state and local taxes assessed on compensation of employees, and for independent contractor or sole proprietor, wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment or similar compensation. So this is one of the buckets, and this should be used at least in order for the whole PPP to be 100% forgivable, it has to be used at least for 60% or more. And now on the other bucket, I'm going to call them buckets. It's the non-payroll costs the ones that are eligible, and you can use the PPP at least, at most 40% or less. This would include the originals that we had from 2020, which it would be rent, mortgage interest if you have your commercial property, and utilities. And then we got 4 new ones for this year, which are covered operation expenditures, covered property damage, covered supplier costs, and covered worker protection expenditures, which connects to PPE, masks, disinfectants, and this kind of expenses.
Thank you so much for that, Nestor. And with that, I just want to mention at the end of this, our slides and presentations, there will be, oh, well, Kelly's ahead of me, has posted the links and whatnot. But the link where all of this information can be found will be included at the end of this slide presentation, which of course will be available to everyone who's registered for the event, as well as on our website. So if you're looking for where all of this information is located, you will be provided the links to that information. So moving right along, Tim, I have another easy question. It's actually a follow-up question. I'm trying to get another $20 from you. So when is the deadline for the second round application?
March 31st. So the period that has been open for you to apply for second round PPPs is through March 31st. But now let me add a caution on there. The first round, if you got a first round PPP, you should have been impressed with how fast it was. Except for maybe the very first few, you would apply for it, and as soon as that day or the next day, your bank would say, okay, we have a loan number, you're ready to go. And then we required them to disperse the money within 10 days. On second draw, it is not going that fast, and that's intentional. There are a lot more going on behind the scenes to make sure that there's no fraud occurring. So where before it might have just taken a day to get a loan number from the SBA by your banker, it might take a week for that to happen. I mean, it just varies. It depends on a lot of things. It could still be a day, or it could be longer. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, sir. And I do want to mention something. I know this question was asked of you in our partners call this morning. Is that deadline of March 31st related to my application being submitted, or what does that necessarily mean?
You know, I can't be definitive. I believe, though, because with the first round, it was you have to be approved by the end of the time period. So now that you have this little bit of extra time that might be involved in getting approved, I would encourage you, if you're looking for a second draw PPP, to go ahead and get your application in. If you wait longer than, let's say, March 20th, you might not hit the March 31st cutoff. Probably will, but might not. And if you want to be sure about it, I would pull it up and do it sooner. Now, Nestor was exactly right. If you are still spending money on your first draw PPP, you may apply for a second draw. You won't get funded until the first draw is exhausted. So just keep those things in mind. If you know you're going to be going for one, I would, my recommendation, go ahead and talk to your banker now. Let them know that you're in that process. You want to get that second draw, and then go ahead and grab the skids to get it done.
Thank you, sir. So
may I add one more thing to that?
Yes, absolutely.
The experience that we had was that the process, once you had submitted your application to the lender's process may have caused a lot of additional questions and information that was required. And so there was a lot of, the best way to describe it, there was a lot of back and forth, which is very typical for a loan process. So if you wait till the last minute or the last hour, you may not allow for sufficient time to go through that vetting process. So please don't be a latecomer to this. It's treat it like it's first in, first out. Get your application in, get it as complete as possible, and give yourself a fighting chance to get this loan.
Yes, great point, Rodney. You absolutely don't want to wait to the last minute and then have some technicality or hold prevent you from getting access.
And I would like to add another thing in the same topic. Last year we experienced a couple of lenders that they closed their portal 1 week before the deadline. So again, don't wait until the last moment, because if you're expecting that you will be processed and your lender, your preferred lender, closes the process before, you're gonna be, in serious trouble.
And I'm going to add something too. I just want to share. I mentioned this earlier, but I have the actual statistic here. The new PPP has only been going on now for a couple of weeks. There, as of yesterday, roughly 1,000 PPPs for $35 billion. So it's moving pretty quickly. So there's yet another reason, if you're going to do it, to go ahead and get moving. even though this goes through March 31st, the money may not last until March 31st. Now, I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want to cause a panic on all the banks. I don't think that's necessary. But once again, yeah, don't wait. Go on and take care of it.
Absolutely. And I don't think anyone who actually is needing this money will procrastinate if they don't have to, which leads actually into the next question. I believe we've touched on this already, but in this scenario, I haven't been forgiven for the first round. I'm waiting on the bank. So will I be eligible to apply for the second round of PPP? And will I first have to receive the first draw, expend the first draw, then apply for the second draw, all before this date of March 31st? And I'll start with Nestor, and then we'll start the cycle again. But as always, feel free to chime in.
I remember reading that while everything is being checked, you can apply, and SBA will separate the funds. If at the end of the process of revision you get approved, they will make a separate those funds, and you might qualify, but I mean the process needs to be reviewed. That's my understanding.
Okay. Rodney or Tim, do you have anything additional to add to that?
Well, my understanding is that before you, part of the qualifications for PPP, what I call 2.0, is that and I'm just going to read the verbatim here, previously received a first draw PPP loan and will or has used the full amount only for authorized users. So you know, I like how Tim had referenced it earlier. PPP 1 must be fully exhausted, meaning that you've either returned the money, you've either paid the loan back, or you've been forgiven. So you know, you need to make sure that PPP 1 is not a issue that will prevent your loan, your PPP 2, from being processed or approved. Now, the other point that was made, I think the question is can, you know, when you're in the middle of PPP 1, can you go ahead and make your application? I believe that, you know, according to Nestor, you can, but understand you're delaying your own process because PPP 1 is going to be a big roadblock for that application going forward.
Correct. All right. So we'll get back to some sole proprietor questions. So this next question, excuse me, let me find it again. Yes, it was by Jennifer Scott. Her question is, can you clarify if you are paying independent contractors, not employees, you are now eligible to use that money as the amount to apply for the PPP? Is that true? So I will repeat the question, and this question I'll give to Tim. If you were paying independent contractors, so they're technically not employees, 1099, you are now are you now eligible to use that money as the amount to apply for PPP?
Yeah, I'm still not completely clear, but I think I can answer. If you have independent contractors, then your PPP funds that you will have received will be based on 60% or more being spent on your W-2 employees and not your 1099 contractors. And then the remaining 40% on other eligible expenses. Now, one of those eligible expenses with second draw is if you are purchasing, if you're purchasing, if you have an existing contract that existed before the time of the PPP, pull up in front of me.
Basically, raw materials are contracted goods.
Right, basically so. And if that falls into that classification, I got it right here in front of me. Bear with me a second. If I can just get my screen to get a little bit bigger, and it won't do it. Sorry to hold everybody. Here it is. So you got this thing that says expenditures pursuant to a contract in effect at the time of the loan that are essential to your operation at the time the expenditure was made. So this is for supplies, not for contractors. So no, I don't see anywhere with PPP where you can use PPP funds to pay for 1099. And the biggest reason is 1099s are eligible for their own PPP. So To use an example, if you had 10 1099s that you're paying, then you and your 1099 folks can all go to the bank together and apply for 11 PPP loans at the same time if you like. But you cannot use these funds to pay for them.
And yes, so it would be effectively be what I would call double dipping in that case, where the PPP is intended for your W-2 employees. The 1099s can do their own PPP application.
Yeah.
So moving forward,
back to this supplier cost thing, I wanted to read it for myself and make sure it didn't say services, but it doesn't. It specifically says supplier costs, and to me, supplier is so not 1099 labor.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much for that. All right, so Rodney, this next question for you, it's a straightforward one. Are we determining the 25% based on the net or gross profit?
It's based off of the change in your revenue. So when you look at a period in time, say for instance, you're going to look at the change in first quarter of 2019 versus first quarter 2020. In most instances, what you're going to want to change, what you're going to want to evaluate is the impact, the loss of revenue, the dip in the profit, the changes overall in the business from one period to another. And so you have to go through the whole process. If you filed your taxes, then you have your information, that you need in order to make the right determinations to submit to your banks. But it is a relatively simple formula if your organization is following the forms that are being given. Don't make it overcomplicated, but use the tax information from 2019 or 2020, go period by period, or look at it for the entire year, whichever one works out the best for you, and determine which period or which year is best describes your story of how you've been economically injured.
Thank you, sir. And we have a series of straightforward short questions. So this next
I would like to add something additional to what Rodney says. The PPP EFR that corresponds to the second draw published on the 6th of January, there is a section 3.2 and they talk about revenue reduction requirement. And the revenue reduction requirement talks about the gross receipts, and it's great to know that information, because basically the IFR defines what gross receipts mean, and because the PPP regulations they cover from self-employed to independent contractors to LLCs to C corps to S corps to nonprofits, all sorts of type of industries. If it is highly recommended to visit this EFR from SBA. Again, I'm going to say it on the 6th of January, and the number will be number 3 and number Roman 3 and number 2, and it's revenue reduction requirement section. It's going to talk about the gross receipts. That's my take on this.
Okay, I know we're going to have some questions regarding where individuals can find that information. So Nestor, if you could message me in case we receive some after this event, I would definitely like to be able to get that to our Texas small businesses. So I'm going to stick with you, Nestor, for this next question. Again, it's another straightforward one. Do we have to pay taxes on this loan? I believe this question was already asked earlier, but Christina has asked if I received the PPP, and I assume she's talking about the forgiveness. Will I have to pay taxes on it, Nestor?
Yeah, I guess it's the same question presented in a different manner. This is an IRS question. For what I understand right now, it is completely forgiven. I mean, it will not be considered as income by the IRS.
Correct. That is my understanding as well. All right. So this next question is from Carabeth, and I will go to you, Tim, for this. If a business received a PPP loan in the first round, can it get a second one? Straightforward question, already been answered.
Yeah, you just have to meet the criteria for the second round or second draw, which is a little bit different than the first draw. And the most important one of that is you've got to document and be able to illustrate that you've had 25% or greater impact to your gross receipts. And there are multiple ways of demonstrating that. And some of you, for instance, may have only existed for 2019. So you may have to, rather for 2020. So you may have to compare within 2020. There are parameters for doing all of that. And if that's you, my advice is go ahead and talk to a lender. Most of them build forms on their websites for you to apply for these loans, and you should be able to go ahead and get started, and it'll step you through the process.
Thank you, Tim. And I just saw a question that I haven't seen before. I think this is a great question coming in from Paul. So Rodney, this question is for you. And I don't even know if this has been defined before, but I like to find out the answer to it myself. The question is, for the second round of PPP, please define what a quarter is. Is it calendar, is it fiscal, or is it any consecutive 3-month period? So how is that defined, a quarter?
Oh, that is a great question. Typically, give you the tradition, what I think is a traditional general acceptable accounting periods. I think those would be your typical January, February, March is in first quarter, April, May, June, second quarter, so forth and so on. The time period, as I understand it, is those periods, first, second, third, and fourth quarters. I don't know if there's provisions in there for the corporation to, if the corporation is on a different schedule, in terms of defining what their fiscal year is. However, in 90, if not 95 or higher % of the cases, the quarter is going to be a 3-month period as defined and as used by most of the government and businesses as either January, February, March, April, May, or June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Those are typically the quarters that's used.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there was a recent, I don't know when, but sometime in the last week or so, there is some additional detail if you need it, and you have a really oddball way of reporting. Like if you define a quarter as December, January, February, because of the way you report, then there is some instruction on how you can adapt that or use that in order for a loan. Once again, your lender has this information. I know in the case of in Southeast Texas, in my office, my lender relations team does training right now twice a week to the lenders in the area to make sure they're completely up to date on all of this stuff. So they should be ready to help you with that.
Okay, great explanation, Rodney and Tim. Again, I was interested in that question as well. I know that I've operated as both calendar, which is what Rodney mentioned, as well as fiscal, which is, I mean, it's the same months, but it's different years go into effect, but the months stay the same. So January, February, March would be Q1 or quarter one. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for that explanation.
And can I add something?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say that the webinars from Tim's office are great. I have been a student of you, Tim, for many webinars on 2020. So don't miss an opportunity to go to those webinars.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, I attend them as well as invite him to participate in our own. So thank you, sir. Actually, Nestor, I'm going to stick with you for this next question. It's another straightforward one. And the question is, what is the maximum amount that I can apply for the PPP?
Well, again, goes to, it depends on what you are or what your business is, because the guidance provides different situations for for um, partnerships, farmers, independent contractors. There is another classification called the NAICS Code 72 for restaurants and hospitality industry. So I mean, we need to know more about that question.
Okay. About the calculations, I believe I've heard before that it's also determined by your, excuse me, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought someone said something. I thought it was also determined in part by the payroll from the quarter that you have chosen. So not necessarily that you're applying for a certain amount. It's an amount that is calculated. Is that correct, Tim? I see you.
Yeah, it's going to be your average monthly payroll times 2.5. So you don't ask for an amount, you calculate how much you can get. Your average monthly payroll times 2.5. And it just as Nestor says in the second draw, if you are in accommodations or food services, it's 3.5 times.
Correct. So it's not necessarily you're applying for a loan. There's a calculation involved from the information that you provide. All right. So this question was sent in. It's based on a percentage. This question will go to Tim. I believe we're back to you. We were down in 2020, 24.7%, so just under 25%. Will that qualify me for a second round?
Nope. It's got to be 25% or more. There are plenty of folks in your case. I will mention that there's 3 ways laid act that you can do this analysis. So I'm guessing that you've used quarterly financial statements, which is what I would do. You may also, in some cases, just as Rodney said, use your 2019 tax return and your 2020 tax return and compare all of one year to the next year, and that can be used. And then there's another method that is possible, and I think it's particularly important for like people that get paid on 1099s, where you can use your bank statements because they are the ones that capture your revenue, and you can annotate your bank statements to show what your income was in 2019 and in 2020 and compare those. So if you're using one of those methods and not one of the other ones, you may look at that. You may look at if there's another way of approaching your situation. It's tragic that if you're at 24.7%, well, that means you don't qualify. But maybe if you do it on an annual basis, 2019 to 2020 tax return, maybe it'll be 26%. Maybe that will help.
And I go back to a point that I was trying to make earlier. If you're 24.7, you know, make sure that you have people who have great, strong financial acumen to take a look and double check. Your CPA may find 0.3, 0.8, something else that you've overlooked. So this is where, you know, surrounding yourselves by the people who can have an influence on your business positively. You know, this is where you use the speed dial on your phone to get the help that you need. Right.
And to add to Rodney, you might be overstating your revenue because we're using the specific expression, I don't see it in front of me, of gross receipts. You might be including a stream of revenue that to you is income, but to this lending program is not income. Correct. And if you look at it the wrong way, then you might be overstating your revenues and therefore understating the impact.
Oh, that is great information, guys. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for that addition, Rodney. I'm actually going to stick with you for this next question, which is also based on the 25%. So as we just heard from the last question, there's a hard cutoff at that 25%. If your business, the question is, if your business is so small that you don't do a monthly P&L, a monthly profit and loss, what financial records could be acceptable for the confirmation that you have had a 25% loss in revenue? So I don't have an official P&L statement, Rodney. How can I prove that I have had that 25% or more deficit?
Well, I think Tim just gave you the answer. You know, use your bank statements. right? Use your bank statements. So, you know, as well as if you don't have, if that is your challenge and you don't have records to that effect, then your bank record, your bank statements could serve in that effect. The second thing that I would suggest is that you definitely wanted to have your CPA keep you to review the documents as they have been prepared. And again, the options are not that you have to have quarterly statements. If you don't use quarterly, you can certainly use 1 year versus another, 2019 versus 2020. Use that information. So there's more than one way, perhaps, to use an old phrase, to skin this cat. But you know, always bring your CPA or your financial person along to make sure that they can help you provide the data that answers the questions that are being asked and that is most advantageous for you.
Oh, thank you for that, Rodney. Absolutely. One thing, as we're running into the last minutes of this webinar, one thing that we haven't really discussed is the economic injury disaster loan. We mentioned it briefly at the beginning, but we now have a question that ties the two programs together. So the question is, when I applied for forgiveness for my first PPP, my $10,000 EIDL loan was deducted from it. In other words, I had to repay the EIDL. Can I recover that $10,000 now in this second draw? And I'm leaving this open-ended for all three of our panelists. If either of you have something to add to that, and let me know if you need me to repeat the question, but if anyone.
Yeah, I'll jump in. That provision was repealed in the Economic Relief Act. Now, the words that you used were economic injury disaster loan. It would have been the economic injury disaster loan grant. So assuming you got that, it's also called an advance. You were advanced that $10,000. You had a PPP first draw. You applied for forgiveness. They deducted it from your forgiveness. So now you have a loan balance, I would assume, of $10,000. Then what's going to happen is you need to tell your lender will contact the SBA, and we will send that $10,000 back to the lender so they can apply it to your account. And as we would say, we are going to make you whole.
I just saw we had another question related to the EIDL, and you just answered it just now. So regarding the PPP 1.0 forgiveness, it's the EIDL advance counted against PPP 1.0 forgiveness. And yes, it is.
No longer. It's been repealed, and that's really good news.
Exactly. All right. I'm going to find another good one in this last minute. Kevin, I'm going to address a question that Kevin has submitted. The question is, when will the major banks like Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo start processing PPP2 applications? And I'll stick with Rodney for this one since Tim asked the last one. So when will we start processing second draw applications for PPP?
Well, first of all, I think January the 13th was when it all came online, okay? And I know that different institutions have decided to roll. First of all, January 13th, it was open up for the micro businesses, if you will. So January 13th and 14th, it was really restricted for just those entities that met a particular criteria. Starting January the 15th, I think it was rolled out to the rest of the small business community. But the lenders that were involved, and there's more to this question, and perhaps Tim can add on to this, or Nestor. But the more to this is that the lenders themselves have been trying to get their processes in order, get their portals ready, processing their applications, because as you understand that there are a lot of moving pieces as we went from PPP 1.0 to PPP 2.0. So some banks are coming online. I saw last week I think I saw at the beginning of this week, one of the major institutions was starting to accept the application as of Monday of this week. I don't want to call any names because I don't want to get anything wrong. But the second piece of that that I think I understood is that, you know, if your lender if the group you went through or the organization you went through to get your PPP1, they're going to be declared as your primary lender for PPP2. So they get to determine, so whenever they're ready, that's who you've got to go back to, unless your loan was sold or that institution is no longer around, which I don't think would be the case. But so primary lender relationships is a part of this equation, but it's up to the lender as to when they get their systems in order, when they get their processes and their applications ready to roll out. And there's also some checks and balances that has to be done between the lender and the SBA. So when all of those lights are green, then PPP 2.0 will, you know, start to be processed by the lender. So
wonderful, thank you.
And I'm going to add just a little thing. Check with your lenders, because there are some that will not process the PPP anymore for this second round. So just double check with your lender.
Absolutely. So the big takeaway from that is it's going to vary from lender to lender and location to location. So there's not just one blanket date. We are at the 2 o'clock hour, but I do have one question that it didn't get a lot of response, surprisingly, but I do want to ask it because it is, if it's not on the minds of our business owners now, it will soon be on their minds. And this question I'm going to give to Tim, since it is specific to the SBA. The question is, what is the best way to check the status of an application that has been submitted from the SBA standpoint? So what would be the best way? I've submitted my application or I've applied for forgiveness. How can I find out where I am in that process?
Okay. If you have applied for a PPP loan, then the communication is going to be with the lender, whoever that lender was. So if you want to know the status of your PPP loan, you should always talk to the lender. Now, once you apply for forgiveness, they go through their process, and once they get to a conclusion, then they send it to the SBA, and we get 90 days to look at that forgiveness before we make a decision and send it back to the bank. During that 90-day period, still, it's your lender, because your lender has the ability to reach out to the SBA for a status. But the general time frames are, you submit a forgiveness application today, your lender gets up to 60 days to review your forgiveness application before they submit to the SBA. Then the SBA gets 90 days to see if we agree with what their findings were before a final decision is made. So hope that answered the question.
Yes, absolutely. So the key takeaway from that was the lender has a lot of control, but I'm so glad that you included the timeline so that it gives some sort of a schedule to expect in this process. But
we get calls pretty frequently, and people say, look, I'm working with the First National Bank of Tim, and they won't tell me what's going on with my PPP loan, or I can't reach them, or I forgot their number, and can you tell me what's going on with my loan? And the answer is no, we can't, because everything you're doing is with that bank. So really, you want to make sure that your communications are with your PPP lender.
Absolutely. It goes back to what Rodney mentioned earlier about the relationships and for people. Have your bank as a person who you can have on speed dial and get that information from. So we are past the 2 o'clock hour. I apologize for going over time. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but shortly Kelly will put up a slide with a lot of contact information for our specific offices. If you do have further questions, get in contact with your local SBDC, your SCORE chapter, with our office, the Office of the Governor, Economic Development and Tourism. But thank you all, our panelists, for being here and providing such great information. So I will, at this time, hand over to my colleague, Kelly Spillane.
Great, and thank you, Jarvis. And what a powerful session that was. I think between our panel and our colleagues backstage, Sam and Michael, in fact, Sam and Michael on their own answered nearly 200 questions. So this has been phenomenal. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, audience, for asking the questions and for staying with us and continuing to listen. And so we'll quickly wrap this up, and I'll just show you the last two slides have the resources that might be useful to you, contact information and links to the information that was referred to during this session. This slide has Office of the Governor, contact information and links, and then this last slide has Small Business Development Centre contacts, Small Business Administration. There's also SCORE. You can get advice from SCORE and SCORE mentors for free on this very subject also. And so these resources are there for you. Like you just heard for the last hour, really the oracle, the place to go for information is your lender. But in the meantime, even if you're not getting an answer from them, somewhere in these 2 slides, you'll be able to get answers to your questions. And our email address, the small business team at the Office of the Governor's email address is in there too. So thank you for joining us. I'd like to pause for a second and just say to Adriana, if you're still with us, would you like to say a few words?
I am here, Kelly, and I think I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Some great information, and appreciate it, and keep following us to see when the next one is going to be.
Excellent. And thank you, Adriana. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, small business team, and thank you, audience. And we will see you soon. We will be scheduling the next event. Currently, it's for the 17th of February, but there may be one sooner. So watch this space. Have a great day and thank you.